Right, we think we got everybody situated, so we're ready for our next case, and this is Miss Lisa Johnson. Would you introduce yourself, tell us your name and your DOC number?
My name is Lisa Landry Johnson, 332-435.
Council, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, good afternoon. This is Stanislav Moroz of the Women's Prison Project on behalf of Lisa Landry Johnson.
We'll let you close it out for us at the end. Is that okay?
Yes, please. That would be great. Thank you.
Let me just acknowledge the folks we have here in support, here and there. Carrie Myers, Jerica Landry, Rachel Landry, Alyssa Landry, Emily Beasley, Karen Copeland, Christy Sheremy, Sabrina Monaco, Demetrici Moore, Ashley Posey, Hannah Grodell, and Becky Concord. Both Ms. Grodell and Ms. Concord are at LCIW. In opposition, we have here with us today Craig Johnson, Renee Johnson, Virginia Munson, Michael Johnson, and the district attorney's office is also here. And we'll call on those folks who've indicated they'd like to speak at the appropriate time. First, let me just read some identifying information into the record, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Marabella because your case has been assigned to him. So, Ms. Johnson, Lisa Landry Johnson, you're here today seeking a commutation of your sentence, having been sentenced in the 14th JDC, Calcasieu Parish, in February of 2006 to a life sentence for a second-degree murder. Is that information correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Would you answer Mr. Marabella's questions, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Johnson, my name is Tony Marabella. I've got a few questions for you. How old are you, Ms. Johnson?
50,
And how long have you been in prison on these charges?
almost 19 years.
I want to talk to you a little bit about what got you here, why you're in prison, okay? Let's talk about Mr. Paul Johnson. That was your husband.
Jerry Paul,
How long had y'all been married?
almost 8 days.
Tell me about your relationship. How long had you known him?
Since we were in high school,
So tell me, how long were y'all together before you got married?
maybe like 4 months.
And how is it y'all decided to get married?
Jerry been wanting to get married when he came back from Texas, and I kept putting it off. And just one day I decided that I would marry him because between him and my mom, and that's how we wound up getting married.
Now, how long had he been in Texas?
I want to say like 5 years or so.
So when was the last time you had seen him until he came back from Texas? Was there a time where, when he was in Texas, were y'all together? Were y'all communicating? What was the situation between you and he while he was in Texas?
We communicated on and off,
Okay.
but not
Y'all
like,
in any kind of a relationship?
no, not at that time.
And so when did you begin your relationship with him? You said about four months or so. Tell me how that developed.
Our daughter Alyssa was having problems, and I didn't want her to get caught up with one of my neighbor's daughters. So I gave.
How old is your daughter, Alyssa?
She was like 11.
And he was the father?
Yes.
Did y'all have other children or just Alyssa?
No, all 3 of them are Jerry kids.
And so, so you had 3 children with him, and then he left and went to Texas?
Yes, that's what he did.
And did you have any other relationships while he was gone?
I did.
So y'all were basically split up, and then he came back a few months before this happened. Is that right?
That's correct.
So tell me how y'all got together. You were having trouble with, at least you were concerned about Alyssa. So tell me about that.
Jerry came down from Texas, and Jerry took me and my two other daughters, our two other daughters, with him to Texas because he said he didn't have anyone to watch Alyssa, so I was gonna have to wind up babysitting her.
And so what happened?
I stayed out, well, actually, we stayed out there with Jerry for like almost 2 weeks. I got homesick, so he brought me back to Lake Charles to my apartment. And from there, Jerry went back to Texas just to get his stuff and put it in a storage unit. So he wound up back in Lake Charles.
So what was the plan? The two of y'all were gonna live together in Lake Charles together?
It was an on and off thing. Sometimes he stayed at my apartment and sometimes he stayed at his house.
What was the relationship like?
Not healthy.
Okay, tell me why it wasn't healthy.
It wasn't healthy because Jerry was like being controlling, and I'm drinking because he's being controlling.
Describe controlling for me.
When I say controlling, like he wanted to know my whereabouts 24/7. He's questioning the kids about my whereabouts. Things are going on at his job with other people. And whenever when he get off of work, he comes and he's asking me if I'm doing the same things that these women are doing with the men at his job, like cheating on
He
me.
hears about some things going on with some of his coworkers at work, and he comes home to question you whether you're doing the same thing to him.
That's correct.
Now, let's talk a little bit about your drinking. You said, part was his controlling and part was your drinking. Let's talk about your drinking. How long had you been drinking?
I had been drinking a good while,
Okay.
but
Let's start from the beginning. When did you start drinking? How young were you when you first started drinking?
I first started drinking maybe 21 years old, 22 years old.
All right. Did it become a problem initially?
Eventually it did.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. How did it progress? What did you start drinking in 21?
Like wine,
Okay,
Boone's Farm,
okay, and then progress to what?
harder liquor.
How often would you, how did your drinking progress to the point where it obviously became a problem? And you mentioned it was an issue. So how did it get to be a problem?
It became an issue because that's how I was coping with the mental stuff I was going through, like just depressed, just different things that I was going through with Jerry. So I would drink more.
Do you consider yourself to be an alcoholic?
I feel like I have my triggers. I feel like I'm
Well,
always have to work on this.
I'm going to ask the question again. Can we both agree that you're an alcoholic?
Yes, sir.
So tell me how your drinking had to do with a lot of things that were going on with you.
First, the mental abuse,
Okay.
the physical abuse is really what I was going through.
And when were you physically abused? I assume by him. When were you, describe some of the times you were physically abused by him?
Like one time I was at my parents' house and I was pregnant with Alyssa.
Now, how tall? Okay. Alyssa was 11, you said, I think, at the time this occurred?
No, what I'm saying is you're asking me to explain a situation with the drinking.
Yeah. Well, you said, I asked you about abuse. You said when Alyssa was a little baby. And so I said Alyssa was 11 at the time this happened. So we're talking about a long time ago.
Yeah.
So you've had an abusive relationship with him your entire relationship. Is that what I'm hearing?
Pretty much.
So why did y'all get back together when he came back from Texas?
Because Jerry was saying he was a changed person. We
Okay.
hadn't been together for years, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I loved him and I cared about him. And I have 3 kids with him.
4 months or so, y'all were okay, and then you decided to get married. Now, tell me about the marriage, because I read what you wrote about the marriage. I mean, your writings in our records suggest that you got married because your mother was pushing you to do it and you were drunk. So tell me about why you married him.
I think I just married him out of convenience.
Well, you're in the filings, you indicate that you were drunk when you married him, or you were drunk when you agreed to marry him. So tell me about that.
I went to get something to drink to get married because I felt uncomfortable marrying him. So I wanted to be on another level. I didn't want to be sober.
So why did you marry him then? Why did you agree to marry him if you didn't want to marry him and you had to get drunk to marry him? Why would you want to marry him? I mean, you'd lived 5 years without him.
True.
So why would you marry him?
I still cared about him. I mean, I married him and I wanted it to work because I went on and married him.
So tell me what happened about the day that you ultimately killed him, which would have been December the 30th. So, I mean, we're talking right around New Year's, I guess. Huh? Is that right? My time frame correct?
Yeah, that's about
So
right.
tell me what happened.
Jerry and Jerry wanted to take a trip to Leesville. So it was him, me, and my sister Sarah, and his co-worker. We went to Leesville. And on the way there, we had been drinking. And me and Jerry
Let me
had
stop you. How often were you drinking during this time? Were you drinking every day?
just about
How much were you drinking every day?
sometimes more than others.
And what were you drinking? You indicated Boone's Farm years ago when you first started drinking. What were you drinking during these times?
At this time, it was really like wine and beer.
Go ahead. So tell me what happened on this particular day that led up to this killing.
Well, on the way to Leesville, me and Jerry was having a conversation about the marriage, which he agreed that we were going to get it annulled. While we were in Leesville, he agreed that. But
Why
in the
did y'all
process,
decide you wanted to annul the marriage? Who wanted the annulment?
I wanted the annulment. And he agreed to it while we was in Leesville. But on the way coming back from Leesville, the story changed. He started fussing because I wanted annulment. And I told him when we were on our way going back to my apartment for him not to get out at the apartment. So he has this cup in his hand and he throws it at me and his hand hit the side of my face, touching my ear. And I leave out the vehicle to go tell my brother Josh in the house that
Are y'all back in Lake Charles?
we're back in Lake Charles at this
All right,
point.
okay.
And I'm trying to get to the apartment, but Jerry is running behind me, fighting on me. But once I make it to the door, he's behind me trying to come up in the apartment. And I'm trying to tell my brother Josh to tell Jerry not to stay, that for him to leave.
And whose apartment is this?
It's my apartment.
And that's where the two of you are living together?
Sometime he stayed there and sometime he didn't.
I
But
mean, y'all got married. Y'all had been married how long? 8 days?
almost 8 days.
Where were you living when you were married? Where were you living before you went to Leesville?
No, we didn't stay in Leesville. We stayed in Lake Charles.
I understand that, but you said you went to Leesville. And on the way back, you got in this argument. Where were you living before you went there? Was he living with you in that apartment?
Not this particular time.
So
He,
y'all got married and you weren't living together?
the day before this happened, he stayed at his house because I wanted annulment. Because we were talking about a sensitive issue in our marriage. And he
What was
didn't
the
feel,
sensitive issue you were talking about?
Jerry was just like involved in pornography. And it was just too much. So he didn't like the idea that I was discussing it with my family. So he didn't stay there that night.
So
So,
what happened when you got
back.
back to Lake Charles? Go ahead.
and I go up in an apartment, telling my brother, hold on, let's try. I go in the apartment, telling my brother Josh to tell him to leave. My brother Josh tells him to leave, but he says he's not gonna leave because he's married. So he goes to the sofa and sits down and just start taking off his shoes. So I'm telling him I'm gonna call the cops. And he says, call them. All they're gonna do is just make me leave. So I'm still roaming around fussing because I want him to leave. So I'm telling him, I go up in the kitchen and I get some knives and I tell him, I said, I'm telling him to leave. I said, if you do not leave, I'm gonna cut you. So he jumps up in my face and he says, do what you gotta do. And he said, I dare you. And then after I stabbed him, he said, it didn't hurt. He walked off and I'm just looking at him go down the hall and he come back through there and he collapsed.
How many times did you stab him?
I stabbed him one time. I had 2 knives in each hand.
You had 2 knives in each hand and 4 knives?
4.
And how many knives did you stab him with? Only once.
The 2 knives in my hand.
So you stabbed him once with 4 knives?
No, once with 2 knives.
Once with 2 knives. And where'd you stab him at?
I think towards the collarbone.
So towards his neck.
I don't know, the shoulder.
So why
somewhere.
did you do that? Were you drunk?
I was scared.
Were you drunk? Were you drinking that day?
I was drinking, yeah, I was drinking. But I was scared.
So you've been in prison for 19 years now. So tell me what your thoughts about that day are. What might you have done differently now that you sit here today?
I know one thing, I don't need to drink.
You and I can both agree on that. What else might you do differently?
I still need to go to like my meetings. Because those meetings are helpful for me.
It's about your drinking. What about your killing? What about what you did to him? What would you do differently today?
I would be able to own up and live a sober life.
What does that mean, own up and live a sober life? I mean, we're talking about you're killing your husband. What would you have done differently today if you could do that all over again? I hear you wouldn't drink, that's a good thing. But what else might you have done? Do you think about having killed him? Killed the father of your children?
Yeah, I think about it.
What do you think about that? Tell me what your thoughts are when you think about having done that.
I feel bad.
Why do you feel bad?
Because if I would have been sober, I could have thought differently. I mean, I've been with this man all that time when we were together, and I have 3 kids with him. So
But it sounds like you were drunk the whole time you were with him, but you never killed him.
You're right. I'm
So
not saying what I did
Thoughts
was
about
great.
that? What are your thoughts about that? What do you think that's done to your children, to his family? You ever give that any thought?
I do.
Tell me about your thoughts about that.
I feel bad. And I know they're hurting. I feel bad these people are hurting, behind my actions. And if I could turn it, I would. I mean, I know it affected his family. It affected my family. It affected a lot of people. And I'm sorry.
Let's talk a little bit about what you've done for your alcohol problem. Okay. What have you taken while you've been in prison for substance abuse?
I've taken substance abuse. I've taken Celebrate Recovery. I've taken Life Healing Choices. And I go to my AA meetings.
So what would be your plan to stay sober if you were ultimately released in the future?
Go to my AA meetings and get me a sponsor.
What are some of your triggers?
Just stress, life. But I know I can do it because I'm sober in here, and I don't need that.
Are there AA meetings there where you are? Do you go to AA meetings now?
I go to them every Monday, yes.
Okay. And how long have you been going to the AA meetings?
It's been a while.
What's a while?
Like the early part of the year.
Okay. 6, 7 months?
Yes.
You facilitate any of the meetings?
Not AA.
What other programs have you taken that have been very helpful to you?
One of the ones I really like is Life of a Single Mom.
Okay.
And I
Tell
took
me a
that
little bit about that program.
that one. It teaches you how to cope with like being a mom. It's like I love the kids, and I just like want to just to be a good person for them to be able to talk to. It's about kids. It's about being a parent. It teaches you how to be a parent.
How is your relationship with your 3 children now?
It's good. I mean, they support me. They're in my life.
What
And
about anger management? Do you think I know you've taken anger management. Once you've taken anger management, did you realize that maybe in addition to the substance abuse problem, you might have had some anger issues too?
I can believe that, yeah.
You think anger perhaps had something to do in addition to the drinking with what you did that day?
I agree.
What is, I see you've taken, you're in Lifers Association, you've done a bunch of faith-based programs. How have those helped you?
They help me a lot. I mean, it's like support groups.
Now you're in Sisters Keepers. Tell me a little bit about that. What is that?
Is a program that helps women, men, like to notice what is abuse, what is domestic violence, because it comes in different forms. And I've learned a lot from that class.
What would be your plan, your transition plan, if you were ultimately released in the future? I see Mr. Myers is here. I assume Louisiana Parole Project is involved with you. So tell me what your understanding would be with your role with the Louisiana Parole Project.
I will go there, and whatever it is, whatever tools they have to offer or to help me transition out, I'm in.
You've got a pretty good institutional record. It looks like you've had 2 write-ups. Warden, is that right? And the last one, I think, was 2008.
Yes, they're both Schedule A, the low court write-ups as well.
Now, you've had mentor certification training. Tell me about that. What is that?
That's a class that I've had since I'm in seminary, and it teaches you how to be a peer minister. Like when people are going through different things, they want someone to talk to or listen, just to listen to them.
Now, my notes reflect you started the seminary in around 2022. Are you still in there? Are you still going? Are you done? What's your status with the seminary?
I have 2 more years.
Okay. And tell me what your hopes are with that. What would you hope to do when you finish that?
I really want to work with like children and like women. I just want to give back to the community.
Since you've been, I know you've only had 2 write-ups, but since you've been in prison, have you had anything to drink? I mean, how have you been getting along with alcohol or without alcohol? Put it that way.
I've been getting along good without it.
And do you think that that's something that you need to do forever?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever do drugs?
I did marijuana before,
Okay. And how long ago did you do that?
like almost 19 years ago.
And so were you doing marijuana during this time? I mean, you've been in jail 19 years. So you were drinking and doing a little marijuana every now and then, or were you doing marijuana more often too?
I didn't do it as often as I did my drinking.
But you were smoking and drinking at the same time. How about that particular day, this time of your marriage, when you had to get drunk to get married? Were you smoking marijuana as well?
No, I wasn't.
Gordon, what can you tell us about Ms. Landry Johnson?
Yes, sir. She is minimum custody, and we kind of already touched on her excellent disciplinary record. So no issues from a security standpoint or concerns with us at all. She does live in our reentry dorm. So she, I know she talked about the peer ministering, but can additionally help with some of our reentry students. And, she spends a good bit of time focusing on her schoolwork in the seminary program. So she does well. We have not had any issues, the duration of time that she's been with us. And I think Mr. Myers obviously can touch on the parole project.
Thank you, Warden. I appreciate your comments. Madam Chairman, that's all the questions.
All right, thank you. We'll hear from the support. We have 2 daughters that want to speak in support. Could we first hear from Jerica Landry, Sam? Go ahead. Just introduce yourself.
My name is Jerica Landry Sam. I'm the oldest daughter of both Lisa Landry Johnson and Jerry Johnson. I am here today in support of my mother being granted clemency. The past 19 years without both of my parents have been rough. Growing up, my mom was very loving, supportive, and present. You could count on her being there for us, whether physically, emotionally, or even spiritually. She would help with homework, make family time a priority, and allow me to just be myself without judgment. If she couldn't solve the issue, then she would definitely pray for it and with us. I love my father as well. We would live with him for Christmas and summer breaks and would see him maybe once in between. I valued the time we spent together, but I also saw him treat my mom in ways that really scared me. His death was really hard for me because I had to grow up without my dad and with my mom in prison. And I felt like most of my dad's family wasn't really there for me. I tried to create bonds once I was grown, but I would never be willing to neglect my mother because I knew the type of person she was, and I saw what my parents' relationship was really like. My mom has missed out on a lot of birthdays, graduations, and even births of her grandkids. She's also had to endure the illness and death of her father. She would do her best to support us all from prison through her letters and phone calls, but it just isn't the same as having her here in person. If you were to allow my mother her freedom, then we could continue building the bond that was already established with her children, and she can continue building the bond she has with her grandchildren. I do a lot of cooking and baking, and I'm hoping to be able to do that for my mom. My children have enjoyed being able to participate in the Christmas and Easter events where they're able to spend time with their grandmother at the prison and sometimes ask them they're going again. I know that she could bring the same love and attention she gave me as a little girl to them if she was able to come home. I know my mom would love to go to the Parole project, but when that's over with, she is more than welcome to stay with me. My sister Alyssa couldn't be here today because she just had a baby, but she also lives in Lake Charles and is really hoping my mom can come home. I implore you to please see her for the wonderful and kind person she truly is. Before you sign.
Thank you. Thank you for doing it. And we have Rachel Landry.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Landry. I am Lisa Landry Johnson and Jerry Johnson's youngest daughter. I'm here today in support of my mother being granted clemency. It has definitely been a very long 19 years without my parents. I love both of my parents, but both of them gave me two different views. My mom was very loving. I never felt unsafe or scared. My mom always knew how to comfort me, whether it was in prayer or simple words of encouragement. My mom missed out on a lot of meaningful events like birthdays and graduations. My mom was like my best friend. We'd laugh and dance together. My mom would color with me and my sisters. We'd have random talks. My mom gave us options. She wasn't a demanding parent. My mom wanted us safe and she did her best in making sure we was. I love my dad too. He would sometimes take me to candy crates in the mall. It was a happy place for a kid, and honestly, he seemed happy being there too. But sometimes my dad wasn't happy, and you can see it on his face. When my dad moved back from Texas, my parents got back together, but I remember my mom being scared of him at times. I saw my dad corner my mom once in the bathroom. I wanted to help my mom, but I felt so powerless. My mom is a wonderful individual that was trying to survive in the midst of abuse. My mom's father recently passed away, and she had to face this situation while still being in prison. I wish I could have been together with her when my grandpa died. If my mother is granted clemency, it would mean the world to me. We could read poetry face to face, dance, hug, and eat good meals together. I know if my mom is able to go to the Parole project, it will be a success. I will be there to support her in every possible way I can. Thank you.
Now we'll hear from the opposing Mr. Michael Johnson. Okay. Miss Virginia.
My name is Susan Manson, and I'm the mother of Jerry Johnson. Jerry was my middle son. He was a kind boy. He never got in any trouble. He never caused any problems. He was a hard worker, and he did love his kids. That was Jerry's whole life, was his kids. But he had to deal with Lisa in order to be able to see his kids. He had to do what she wanted him to do in order for him to see the kids. Lisa was the aggressor. Lisa caused problems from day one. She never gave Jerry a break. What Lisa did to my son, she stabbed him with 2 knives in his chest and severed his main artery, and he died seconds later. She didn't care. She said she did not care if he died, and he did die. He did. And I'm asking you today to leave her where she is, because what she was then, she is still there. She has never changed. What she was when she was involved with my son is what she will be if she gets clemency. I'm asking you to keep her where she is, because what she is her in her DNA. It's no change. That's in her DNA. And I'm asking you to leave her where she is. I don't want to have to face her. I don't want to have to go out in the community and see her. And I'm asking you to let her stay where she is. That's where she belongs, where everybody's safe, where we don't have to deal with her. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
My name is Greg Johnson. I'm the older brother of Jerry. I pretty much raised Jerry as a young person coming up on mother work. It's very hard for me to stand before you asking for you to deny her clemency. Just imagine losing a loved one during natural causes, or lose a loved one for a sickness. But to lose a loved one, my brother, from rage or violence is something that you can't live with. You think about it daily. It's not a day that don't go by that don't speak of him. I share memories with my wife, and he would never get to see our kids coming up. And I actually please deny this request. And I couldn't bear the fact of seeing her in the community after what has been done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm here asking that you do not give Lisa any type of clemency, any post eviction relief. I sat and listened to my brother spoken of as being an aggressive individual when he was never anything near aggressive. He was very charismatic. He was very effective person. He did things for others without wanting anything in return. And he spent his whole life loving his children. I mean, he was very much a dad. And the idea that I can go anywhere in public and come across Lisa with this unfathomable. So I'm asking, begging that you do not give her any type of clemency, really anything where she belongs.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Pipes?
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm David Pipes with Commute Parish. And on behalf of the Johnson family, I first want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak, take our views into account. I don't know what my words can add to what you've heard or what solace they can give, but it is clear reading the materials and listening to Lisa Landry Johnson that her account of what happened that day does not reflect what the witnesses testified to or what they told the police. It is maybe her truth now, but it is a construct designed to be self-serving and to minimize what she did. The summary prepared by the probation and parole officer would give you the impression, or it could give you the impression, that this was a fist fight that escalated to an ultimate act of violence. It wasn't. Yes, Jerry Johnson threw a styrofoam cup of gin at Lisa Landry Johnson. That would not justify murder. But that was also not the triggering act that led to this killing. When she went into that kitchen and armed herself with knives and came charging at him in the living room, he stood there, his 126-pound frame with his arms to his side, because he didn't think she would kill him. From what was presented here and what has been presented in court, where she is still fighting to undo her conviction in post-conviction proceedings, it's clear that she doesn't understand that Jerry Johnson was the victim of her. His family was the victim of her. Her daughters were the victim of her. She took their father away from them, but she also destroyed any chance they would have of a normal relationship with his family. She has shattered, from what I hear today, at least 4 generations of a family. And she has no empathy for that fact. She has no communion with the fact that she killed a man, and she blames it on alcohol and maybe anger. The fact that she has no empathy for her victims, plural, more than any other reason, is why our office stands in opposition to an act of clemency and would ask the application be done.
Mr. Myers, I overlooked your name. Is there anything that you'd like to add in support?
Good afternoon, Mr. Renata. We just want to let the board know that we are here to support Ms. Johnson on her transition. We understand that she's going to have some needs. We're prepared through our social worker to have her go through an evaluation, both substance abuse and mental health, particularly connect her to any counseling that might be necessary to work on any latent trauma issues. We're also prepared to work with her and her family for the appropriate time to decide what's best for her future. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Johnson, before we turn it over to your attorney, is there a statement you'd like to make?
Yes.
Okay.
May I read it?
Yes, you can.
There are not enough words I can say or utter that would alleviate the pain of loss and grief that my action brought upon your family and mine as well. If only I could travel back in time and erase the choice I made on that dreadful day, I would without any hesitation. I hope in time each of your hearts will begin to mend. Again, I am deeply sorry for my actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Counsel?
Yes. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the very, very real pain that Mr. Johnson's family went through with all of this because of Ms. Landry's actions. You know, I haven't had a chance to speak to Mr. Johnson's siblings or mother, but I have spent a lot of time with his children. And I know that despite all of the abuse that their mother suffered and everything in their relationship, they really loved their father, and they still do. And I know Ms. Landry did the same, also loved him. I want to say that the sorrow that Ms. Landry felt has been a really big motivator for all the change she has done in the last almost 19 years in prison. I mean, Ms. Landry really came to prison in shambles. She had just taken the life of the father of her kids. She had suffered abuse that was, I'll talk about in a little bit, for the majority of her adult life. And she didn't have the sort of healthy coping mechanisms that she has today to deal with all that. And she has come so far. Today, she is a college student, a Christian college student with the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. She's a certified mentor with them. She facilitates the Life of a Single Mom group. She was going to see a woman who was in the infirmary to make sure that she had the support that she needed. She's taken programming to address the real reasons she's in prison, multiple substance abuse programs. She's been in AA. She's taken domestic violence programming. And she has been an incredibly loving mother and grandmother to the 3 children she shared with Mr. Johnson and their grandchildren. And with all that, she also has been an exemplary citizen of LCIW. She hasn't had a write-up in over 15 years. And I think Ms. Landry's rehabilitation is evident from all that, but I did just want to address some things that came up at the hearing that I feel like need to be addressed. So first, I know it's hard for anyone to go before the board, and as the board obviously knows, it's especially hard for Ms. Landry because she is a very shy person, an introvert by nature. She's someone who feels most at peace in the library or praying in the chapel. And so expressing herself today, I know is a really big challenge for her. But that's even further compounded just by how hard it is to talk about things that are so personal when you have to be strong for so long. But I'll say that through the letters that people sent on behalf of Ms. Landry, you can tell how much sorrow she feels. You can tell that she has taken responsibility. You can tell that she's remorseful. For example, Dr. Sharkey, the statewide DOC chaplain, wrote that she's seen Ms. Landry, quote, experience a deeper healing and greater understanding of her painful past. Rachel Rose Hillary, a woman Ms. Landry was incarcerated with here, but is now released, wrote that Ms. Landry talked to her about how she felt, how the pain she felt and she caused to Mr. Johnson's family. So I would just ask the board to consider what the people who really know Ms. Landry have to say about her. I did also want to address the context of domestic violence and some of the questions about the incident today. I think hope I can clarify some issues. I'd first just point the board to the materials we provided. There was a report by expert Beth Meeks. Beth Meeks was the former head of the Louisiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. She was a secretary of the Louisiana Domestic Violence Prevention Commission, and she was the expert in the seminal Louisiana Supreme Court case about domestic violence, State v. Curley. She reviewed all the materials and concluded that Ms. Landry was at a high risk of being killed by Mr. Johnson. And it's not just this expert report. Ms. Landry had called the police on Mr. Johnson multiple times, including 2 weeks before this incident when he refused to leave the home. And they actually gave her, she ended up getting an infraction from her apartment. She was living in public housing because she wasn't allowed to have guests there, staying there. And so she had also called the police on multiple other occasions to have Mr. Johnson removed from the home. And so there was a history of her not being able to feel safe in her space, which I think is relevant context. This is also supported by affidavits from her former roommates, a neighbor, our Barber College classmate, and her family members. And really importantly, it's corroborated by her children. We know with domestic violence that often the children are the people in the best position to see what's really going on in the home. And you heard Jerica and Rachel testify today. Jerica saw her father strangle her mother. Rachel saw her father corner her mother. And all of the 3 children support Ms. Landry. And I think that just speaks volumes to what was going on. The narrative that Ms. Landry told was actually incredibly consistent with what other witnesses and the police said. And there was also testimony that as she was entering the home, Mr. Johnson was hitting her that went uncontradicted. And so she was trying to fight him away to even get into the home. The testimony was also that Mr. Johnson jumped up when Ms. Landry got the knives and cornered her. And I'm not saying that to say that Ms. Landry made the right decision that day or anything like that. And I know it's a decision that she regrets quite a bit more than any other decision in her life. But this is context that I think is important to know, and it's all supported by the transcript and uncontroverted records. I would just ask the board to consider just how far Ms. Landry has come in all this time. I would ask the board to consider that all 3 children who are victims too knew Ms. Landry as someone who was warm, kind, and loving, and recognized that there was abuse going on. And so in recognition of all of that, the fact that she hasn't had a write-up in over 15 years, we would ask the board to recommend clemency to the governor. We would ask the board to recommend credit for time served, or in the alternative, a term of years with immediate parole eligibility. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think we are prepared to vote, Arabella.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank everyone, the victims' family who's here today, the supporters here today. That gives us a whole picture. We're able to view everything. Ms. Landry, Ms. Landry Johnson. I think that you've been honest with me today. I recognize it's probably difficult for you to answer all of the questions that I was asking you. I think you answered them as honestly as you could. I have read all of the information and all of the letters that your attorney has pointed out, although you may not have explained it as well as perhaps I would have wanted you to for the hearing. I think you certainly recognize what you did. You appear to be very remorseful for it. This is a very, very difficult case because the victims and the supporters are interrelated. I mean, this is just it's a case that fractures the whole concept of family. Daughters, but again, I'm looking at who you are today, what you've accomplished while you've been in prison. You recognized, and you obviously are an alcoholic. You recognize that. You recognize what you need to do to be able to maintain your sobriety. I think you've also recognized that you've had anger issues and you've dealt with those. You found meaning in your life now. You've had an excellent prison record, an excellent disciplinary record. You're continuing your studies in seminary. Good comments from the warden. A low risk, moderate needs, substance abuse, but you are addressing those. Based upon all of that information that I have today, my vote would be to recommend to the governor that he commute your sentence to 40 years.
Mr. Freeman.
I've listened very intently too, and I also want to thank both sides for coming here today. Guess I saw things a little different. I mean, I read the report. He was not the aggressor that night. Your own brother said that he just stood there with his arms at his side. He didn't rush you or anything. You just stabbed him. I mean, maybe it was a bunch of events which led up to the stabbing. But the bottom line is you took somebody's life. And to me, somebody's life is worth more than 18 years. And I'm sorry. I think you're doing great. I think you're on the right path. I think your day will come that you are going to get out. But it's not the day for me. My vote is to deny.
Mrs. Jackson.
I think you've done an excellent job. I think you've done all that a person could be expected to do. This breaks my heart that these young ladies and their other siblings have lost their father, their mother, and their father's family. I don't understand how you turn your back on such wonderful children. but they've lost a lot. And my vote today would be different. Before you, yes, same.
So, Ms. Landry, Ms. Johnson, today would you require a unanimous vote? You've received one vote that was unfavorable or to deny, 2 votes to grant. So the outcome of today's proceeding is that your application for clemency has been denied. Good luck to you.
Thank you.